The war room on Nexus Prime smelled like fear. Danny Cole could not explain how he knew this. But after 3 years fighting alongside aliens, he had learned to read the signs. The Sylvani delegates kept their feathers pressed flat against their skulls. The massive Moktal warriors shifted their weight from foot to foot like nervous children. Even the Drenari, beings made of living crystal who claimed to feel no emotion, had dimmed their inner light to a dull gray. 12 species had gathered here. 12 species that had put aside centuries of conflict to face a common enemy. And now, after 18 months of war against the Vorath Dominion, they stood on the edge of total defeat. Danny leaned against the back wall of the chamber, trying to stay out of the way. He was the only human in the room. At 5'10", he was shorter than every alien present. His combat suit was standard issue, nothing special. He carried no medals, held no important rank. He was just Sergeant Danny Cole from a small town in Nebraska. A man who had joined the coalition forces because he had nothing left on Earth worth staying for. Admiral Kethoran stepped onto the central platform. The Sylvani commander was tall and graceful, with silver feathers that caught the light when he moved. His people were known for their wisdom and their calm in battle. But today, Danny saw something in those golden eyes that he had never seen before. He saw despair. "The situation is grave," the Admiral began. His voice was soft but carried through the entire chamber. "Thesan IV has fallen. The Vorath burned the surface 3 days ago. Their thermal weapons turned the capital city into an ocean of fire. Temperatures in the impact zone exceed 800 degrees. Nothing survives." A murmur passed through the crowd. Danny had heard about the Vorath thermal weapons. They did not simply destroy. They transformed entire battlefields into hellscapes that burned for weeks. The heat alone killed more soldiers than the actual fighting. "Their command ship remains in orbit above Thesan IV, Kethoran continued. "From there, they coordinate attacks on 6 surrounding systems. If we do not destroy that ship, the Dominion will push through our final defensive line within 30 days. General Voss, a Moktal with scales the color of dried blood, slammed his fist against the wall. "Then, we attack. We throw everything at them. Their shields." Kethoran replied quietly. "You know we cannot breach them. Our entire fleet has tried. The Vorath shield technology is beyond anything we possess. Then we find another way." The Admiral nodded slowly. He pressed a button on his wrist device, and a holographic image appeared in the center of the room. It showed the burning ruins of Thesan IV's capital city. Rivers of melted metal flowed through streets that no longer existed. Buildings had collapsed into piles of glowing slag. The sky was black with smoke and ash. "There is another way," Kethoran said. Hidden beneath the ruins of the capital, the Vorath installed a ground-based shield generator. It creates a secondary barrier that protects their command ship from below. If someone could reach that generator and destroy it, we could strike the ship from an unexpected angle. Our fleet would have a chance. Hope flickered through the room, then died. "The generator is here." Kethoran pointed to a spot deep within the burning zone. To reach it, someone would need to travel 3 kilometers through the fire. On foot. No vehicle can survive that heat. No shuttle can land. Someone would need to walk through temperatures that would kill any known species within minutes. Silence fell over the chamber. Danny watched as the aliens looked at each other, then looked away. He understood their reaction. He had studied the coalition species during his training. The Sylvani were bird-like creatures whose feathers would ignite at half the temperatures shown in that hologram. The Moktal were cold-blooded reptiles who needed external heat to survive, but too much would cook them from the inside. The Drenari would shatter like glass under thermal shock. None of them could do this. None of them could even try. "It is a suicide mission," General Voss growled. "No. Worse than suicide. It is impossible." "I know," Kethoran replied. His voice cracked slightly. "I would not ask anyone to attempt it. I share this information only so you understand the full picture. We have one path to victory, and it is blocked by fire." Danny stared at the hologram. 3 kilometers. That was less than 2 miles. Back home, before everything fell apart. He used to run 5 miles every morning. He remembered summer days in Nebraska when the temperature hit 100 degrees, and the humidity made the air feel like soup. He remembered working on his uncle's farm, hauling hay bales under the blazing sun, until his skin turned red and his clothes soaked through with sweat. Humans complained about heat. They suffered in it. But they survived it. He thought about what he had learned in basic training about human biology. Humans could sweat. It sounded simple, almost embarrassing compared to the natural armor of the Moktal or the energy shields of the Drenari. But sweating meant humans could regulate their body temperature in ways most species could not. Humans had evolved under a yellow sun on a planet with extreme climate variations. They had crossed deserts that killed other creatures. They had survived conditions that should have ended them. Danny thought about his wife and daughter. They had died 4 years ago in a car accident on a quiet road outside Lincoln. He had spent a year after that just trying to find a reason to keep breathing. When the aliens made first contact and asked for volunteers to join their coalition forces, Danny signed up because he did not care if he lived or died. But somewhere along the way, fighting alongside these strange and wonderful beings, he had found something worth living for. He had found purpose. He had found people who counted on him. He looked at the hologram again. 3 kilometers through fire. Everyone in this room had already accepted that it could not be done. Everyone except him. Danny raised his hand. Every head in the chamber turned to look at him. The human. The small one. The fragile creature from a backwater planet that had only achieved space travel a generation ago. "I will go," he said. Admiral Kethoran stared at him. The Sylvani's golden eyes were wide with confusion. "Sergeant Cole, you cannot be serious." "I am," General Voss laughed. It was not a kind sound. "Human, I have seen your species. You have no scales, no exoskeleton, no natural protection of any kind. Your skin burns under light that my people find comfortable. You would die before you walked 100 meters. "Maybe," Danny replied, "but I would like to try." The room erupted into noise. Aliens shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. Some laughed, some argued, some simply stared at Danny like he had lost his mind. But Admiral Kethoran did not laugh. He studied Danny with those ancient golden eyes, and slowly, very slowly, he raised one feathered hand for silence. "Why?" the Admiral asked. "Why would you do this?" Danny thought about the question. He thought about Nebraska, and summer heat, and the family he had lost. He thought about Megan Torres, the only other human on this station, who had become his closest friend. He thought about Corporal Zeth, the Moktal who had saved his life twice in battle. "Because someone has to," Danny said simply. "And I am the only one who can." The silence that followed was absolute. Every being in that room stood frozen, staring at the small human who had just volunteered for the impossible. Admiral Kethoran nodded once. "Then may whatever gods you believe in walk with you, Sergeant Cole. You leave at dawn." The news spread through Nexus Prime within hours. A human had volunteered for the Thesson IV mission. A human believed he could walk through fire. Most of the station thought it was a joke. Some thought it was a translation error. A few wondered if the human had simply gone insane from the stress of war. No one believed he would actually succeed. Danny ignored the whispers and the stares. He had work to do. He spent the first few hours after the meeting in the equipment bay, working with the coalition engineers to modify a standard heat-resistant suit. The suit was designed for short exposure to high temperatures during ship repairs and rescue operations. It was never meant for what Danny was planning. A Drenari engineer named Crystallis ran simulations on a holographic display. The numbers were not good. "The suit will protect you for approximately 11 minutes at the temperatures near the edge of the fire zone," she said. Her voice chimed like glass bells. "But as you move deeper, the heat increases. The suit's cooling system will fail around the 2-kilometer mark. After that, you will have perhaps 3 minutes before your core body temperature rises to fatal levels." Danny did the math in his head. 3 kilometers to the target. 3 kilometers back. Even if he moved fast, he would need at least 30 minutes. The suit gave him 14. Can we add more coolant packs? He asked. We can add 2 more. That will give you an additional 4 minutes. 18 minutes. Still not enough. Danny nodded anyway. Do it. And add extra padding on the hands and knees. I might need to climb. Crystallis tilted her crystalline head. You understand that these modifications will not save you. The mathematics are clear. You will die before reaching the target. I understand the mathematics, Danny replied. But mathematics does not know everything about humans. He left the engineer to her work and walked to the observation deck. The stars spread out before him like scattered diamonds against black velvet. Somewhere out there, Thesson IV was burning. Somewhere out there, millions of beings were counting on him to do the impossible. He heard footsteps behind him. He knew who it was without turning around. You are an idiot, Megan Torres said. Danny smiled slightly. Hello to you too. Megan walked up beside him and stared out at the stars. She was a few years younger than Danny, with dark hair cut short for combat efficiency and eyes that had seen too much death. She had joined the coalition forces for different reasons than Danny. She wanted adventure. She wanted to see the galaxy. She had not expected to find a war. I talked to Crystallis, Megan said. She showed me the numbers. The suit fails before you reach the halfway point. Your body temperature will rise until your organs shut down. You will cook from the inside, Danny. You will feel everything. I know. Then why? Megan's voice cracked. Why are you doing this? Danny was quiet for a long moment. He watched a cargo ship drift past the station, its running lights blinking in the darkness. Finally, he spoke. Do you know how humans used to hunt? Back before we invented tools and weapons? Megan frowned at the sudden change of topic. What does that have to do with anything? We were not the fastest animals on Earth. We were not the strongest. We did not have claws, or fangs, or venom, but we had 2 things that no other creature on our planet possessed. Danny held up one finger. First, we could sweat. Our bodies could cool themselves in ways that other animals could not match. And second, Danny held up another finger. We simply refused to stop. We would chase prey for hours under the blazing sun. Other animals would sprint away, but they could not run forever. They would overheat and collapse, and we would walk up to them and finish the hunt. Not because we were faster, because we kept going when everything else had to stop. Megan stared at him. That is ancient history. We are talking about walking through fire, not chasing deer. The fire is just another desert, Danny said. Another challenge that says humans are not built for this. And maybe we are not. But we have always found ways to survive things we should not survive. We crossed oceans in wooden boats. We climbed mountains that killed 9 out of 10 who tried. We went to space in metal boxes held together with prayers and engineering. He turned to face her. The aliens out there, they are amazing. They have technology and abilities we cannot match. But they have one weakness that humans do not share. When they see impossible odds, they accept them. They calculate the mathematics and they give up. Humans look at impossible odds and we get angry. We refuse to believe the universe has the right to tell us what we cannot do. Megan shook her head slowly. That is not courage, Danny. That is stupidity. Maybe. But right now, stupidity is the only thing that might save this war. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, Megan reached out and took Danny's hand. If you die out there, she said quietly, I am going to be very angry with you. I know. I mean it. I will find a way to bring you back just so I can yell at you. Danny squeezed her hand. That sounds fair. The next morning, Danny stood in the launch bay, suited up and ready. His modified heat suit felt heavy on his shoulders, stuffed with extra coolant packs and reinforced padding. The helmet visor was specially treated to resist warping under extreme heat. It was the best equipment the coalition could provide on short notice. It still probably would not be enough. A crowd had gathered to watch him leave. Danny was surprised by how many had come. Sylvani officers stood beside Moktal warriors. Drenari engineers clustered near the back, their crystalline bodies catching the light. Even some of the smaller species had shown up, creatures Danny had never spoken to but who had heard the story of the human who was going to walk through fire. Corporal Zeth pushed through the crowd. The massive Moktal had fought beside Danny in a dozen battles. He had scales the color of dark emeralds and eyes like molten gold. He was the closest thing Danny had to a best friend outside of Megan. Human, Zeth growled. You are either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, Danny admitted. Zeth reached out and clasped Danny's shoulder with one massive clawed hand. Then go be brave and stupid. And come back alive. I still owe you a drink from that game of cards last month. Danny grinned behind his visor. You owe me 3 drinks. I owe you nothing if you die. Fair point. Admiral Ketharon approached as Zeth stepped back. The Sylvani commander looked older than he had the day before. The weight of command pressed down on his silver feathers. Sergeant Cole, he said formally. The Coalition owes you a debt that can never be repaid. Whatever happens down there, know that your courage will be remembered. Danny shook his head. Do not remember me, Admiral. Just win the war. He turned and walked toward the drop pod. The hatch was open, waiting for him. Inside, a small bench and a harness. A one-way trip to a burning world. He paused at the door and looked back. Megan stood at the front of the crowd. She raised one hand in a small wave. Her eyes were red, but she was not crying. She was too strong for that. Danny waved back. Then he stepped inside, closed the hatch, and began his descent into hell. The drop pod hit the surface of Thesson IV with a bone-shaking impact. Danny felt the harness dig into his shoulders as the world around him screamed and shuddered. Warning lights flashed inside the small cabin. Alarms screamed their high-pitched warnings. Then everything went still. He was down. He was alive. The mission had begun. Danny released the harness and checked his suit systems. The external temperature reading made his stomach drop. 412 degrees, and this was the edge of the fire zone. The cool part, he opened the pod hatch and stepped outside. The world was burning. There was no other way to describe it. The sky above was black with smoke so thick that it blocked out the sun. The ground beneath his boots glowed a dull orange. Heat radiating up through layers of melted metal and stone. Buildings that had once stood tall were now twisted skeletons of slag, their shapes barely recognizable. Rivers of molten material flowed through what had once been streets, moving slow and deadly like lava from a volcano. And the heat. God, the heat. Even through his suit, Danny felt it pressing against him from all sides. It was like standing inside an oven. His suit's cooling system hummed at maximum power, fighting to keep his body temperature stable. For now, it was winning. But the temperature readings on his visor kept climbing as he looked toward his destination. He started walking. Every step was an effort. The ground was uneven, covered with debris and fallen structures. Some areas were solid enough to support his weight. Others crumbled beneath his boots, forcing him to jump back and find another path. The air shimmered with heat waves that made everything look distorted and unreal. On Nexus Prime, the Coalition Command Center had gone silent. Every screen showed the feed from Danny's helmet camera. Every sensor tracked his vital signs. Heart rate elevated, core temperature rising slowly, pain indicators beginning to flicker. Admiral Ketharon stood at the center of the room, his feathers pressed tight against his body. He had seen many brave soldiers in his long career. He had watched warriors charge into impossible battles, but he had never seen anything like this. His suit is already at 60% cooling capacity, a technician reported. At this rate, it will fail before he reaches the 1-kilometer mark. He knows, Ketharan replied quietly. On the surface, Danny pushed forward. The temperature had climbed to 520 degrees. His suit's outer layer was beginning to discolor, the specialized material struggling to reflect the intense heat. Sweat poured down his face inside the helmet, and the suit's internal fans worked desperately to evaporate it and cool his skin. He passed the remains of what might have been a school. Small shapes were scattered among the rubble. He did not look too closely. He could not afford to think about what had happened here. He could only move forward. 1 kilometer down, 2 to go. The temperature hit 600 degrees. Danny's suit screamed a warning. The cooling system was failing. One of the external coolant packs had ruptured from the heat, spraying its contents uselessly into the burning air. He now had 11 minutes of cooling left, maybe less. He moved faster. His boots began to stick to the ground with each step. The soles were melting, fusing to the softened surface before tearing free. Each step made a wet, sucking sound that he could hear even through his helmet. His gloves were changing color, going from their original silver to a dirty brown as the material began to break down. In the command center, Megan Torres stood frozen at the back of the room. She watched Danny's vital signs fluctuate on the screen. Heart rate spiking, blood pressure unstable, core temperature climbing degree by degree. She wanted to look away, but she could not. She owed him that much. Corporal Zeth stood beside her. The massive Mokhtal had not moved or spoken since Danny entered the fire zone. His golden eyes were fixed on the screen, watching his friend walk through hell. "He is going to die," someone whispered behind them. "He is going to die, and there is nothing we can do." "Quiet," Zeth growled without turning around. "Watch." Danny reached the halfway point. He was surrounded by fire now. Actual flames licked up from cracks in the ground, feeding on gases released by the melting planet. The temperature reading on his visor had stopped updating. It had exceeded the sensor's maximum range. His suit's cooling system failed completely. The heat hit him like a physical force. It drove through the suit's weakened material and wrapped around his body like a blanket made of pain. His skin began to redden, then blister. He could feel the fluid rising beneath the surface, his body desperately trying to protect itself from damage it could not escape. He screamed. The sound echoed inside his helmet, heard by no one but himself, and he kept walking. Admiral Kethoran leaned forward, his eyes wide. "How?" he whispered. "How is he still moving?" No one had an answer. Danny's mind was fracturing from the pain. He could no longer feel his hands or feet. His vision was blurring, the heat affecting even the interior of his helmet. Every breath burned his throat despite the filtered air. His body was telling him to stop, to lie down, to give up. But somewhere deep inside, in a place the heat could not reach, something refused. He thought about his wife. He thought about his daughter. He thought about the family he had lost, and the family he had found here, among the stars. He thought about Megan and Zeth and all the strange, wonderful beings who were counting on him. He thought about what it meant to be human. Not the biology or the science. The spirit. The stubborn, foolish, magnificent refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. His feet kept moving. A collapsed building blocked his path. The metal framework glowed orange with heat. There was no way around it. The only path forward was over. Danny grabbed the superheated metal and began to climb. His gloves melted instantly. He felt the skin on his palms sear and blacken as it touched the burning surface. The pain was beyond anything he had ever experienced. It was beyond anything he had imagined was possible. His body convulsed, trying to force him to let go. He did not let go. Hand over hand, he pulled himself up and over the obstruction. He left pieces of his suit and pieces of himself on the metal. When he dropped down on the other side, he could barely see. He could barely think. He was running on nothing but will. In the command center, every being stood frozen. Even the technicians had stopped monitoring their equipment. Every eye was fixed on the screen, watching the impossible unfold. A Sylvani officer was crying. Her tears fell silently down her feathered face. A Mokhtal warrior had dropped to one knee, a gesture of respect his people reserved for the greatest heroes. A Drenari engineer's crystalline body pulsed with light, the closest her species could come to showing emotion. And Admiral Kethoran whispered a word that had not been spoken in his language for 1,000 years. A word reserved for spirits that walked between life and death, beings that existed outside the normal rules of existence. "Kethvoran," he breathed. "Ghost of war." On the surface of a burning world, Danny Cole saw his destination ahead. The Vorith shield generator. Just a few hundred meters away. He fell to his knees, then he got back up, and he kept walking. The Vorith shield generator sat in a crater of melted stone, surrounded by the ruins of what had once been a hospital. It was a massive structure, all black metal and pulsing energy conduits, designed to survive the very fires that had destroyed everything around it. The Vorith had built it to last. They had never imagined anyone would reach it. Danny stood at the edge of the crater and stared down at his target. His mind was barely functioning. The heat had pushed his body beyond its limits. His skin was burned across nearly 40% of his surface area. His hands were masses of blistered flesh that barely responded to his commands. His core temperature had risen to dangerous levels, and his brain was beginning to suffer from the effects. But he was here. Against all odds, against all logic, against everything the universe said was possible, he was here. He half climbed, half fell down into the crater. The generator hummed with power, its shield emitters creating a bubble of protection that extended into orbit above. As long as this machine operated, the Vorith command ship was safe from attack. As long as this machine operated, the war was lost. Danny reached for the explosive charges on his belt. His fingers would not cooperate. The damaged nerves and destroyed skin made every movement a fresh wave of agony. He fumbled with the clasps, dropped one charge, picked it up again with shaking hands. On Nexus Prime, the Coalition commanders watched in desperate hope. Admiral Keth Oren had moved closer to the main screen, as if proximity could somehow help the human on the surface. "He is at the target," a technician announced. "He is attempting to place the charges. His vital signs are critical," another voice added. "Heart rate irregular. Core temperature? 41 degrees and climbing. He is going into heat stroke." "Hold on," Keth Oren whispered. "Just hold on." Danny placed the first charge against the main power coupling. His hands were shaking so badly that he nearly dropped it twice. The magnetic lock engaged with a soft click. 1 down, 2 to go. He moved around the generator, searching for the secondary power junction. His vision was tunneling now. Darkness creeping in at the edges. His body was shutting down, system by system, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The second charge locked into place. One more. He found the tertiary junction on the opposite side of the generator. It was protected by a metal grating that he had to tear away with his ruined hands. The pain barely registered anymore. He had moved beyond pain into something else entirely. A place where his body was just a machine and his will was the only thing that mattered. The third charge clicked into place. Danny activated the timer. 10 minutes until detonation. Enough time for the Coalition fleet to get into position. Enough time for them to strike when the shields fell. He triggered the beacon that would tell Admiral Keth Oren the charges were set. The mission was complete. In the command center, cheers erupted. Sylvani officers embraced each other. Moktal warriors roared in triumph. Even the stoic Drenari pulsed with brilliant light, celebrating the impossible success. But Megan Torres did not cheer. She was watching Danny's helmet camera, watching as he turned away from the generator and began walking back the way he had come. "What is he doing?" she whispered. Corporal Zeth moved to her side. "He is trying to come back. That is 3 kilometers through the fire again. He barely survived the first time. He cannot possibly. He is trying anyway." The celebration in the command center died as others realized what was happening. The human was not waiting to die by the generator. He was attempting to return. He was walking back into the inferno that had nearly killed him. High above Thesson IV, the Vorith command ship detected something strange. Their sensors showed a single life sign moving through the fire zone. This should have been impossible. Their thermal weapons had created conditions lethal to every known species. Nothing could survive in that hell. The Vorith commander, a tall insectoid creature with mandibles like black knives, studied the sensor data with growing unease. He ordered a squad of troops to intercept the mysterious target. His soldiers refused. They could not enter the fire zone. Their own exoskeletons would cook from within if they tried. The Vorith had designed their weapons to create barriers that no one could cross. They had trapped themselves behind their own destruction. The commander watched helplessly as the single life sign continued moving. Slowly. Painfully. but moving. "What is it?" his second-in-command asked. What creature could survive that? The commander had no answer. On the surface, Danny was dying. He knew it with absolute certainty. His body had given everything it had. His legs moved more from memory than conscious control. His arms hung at his sides, too damaged to lift. Each breath was a struggle, the heat scarring his lungs even through his helmet's failing filters. 200 meters from the extraction point. 150. 100. He could see the edge of the fire zone ahead. The temperature was dropping slightly. Still lethal. Still impossible. But less impossible than where he had been. 50 meters. His heart stuttered in his chest. A strange sensation, like a hand squeezing from inside. His vision went white, then gray, then black. He fell. On Nexus Prime, Megan Torres screamed his name. She was running before anyone could stop her, sprinting toward the shuttle bay. She did not have a plan. She did not have authorization. She had nothing but the desperate need to reach her friend. She took a short-range shuttle without clearance and flew it straight toward Thesan IV. The station commanders shouted at her over the comm system, ordering her to return. She ignored them all. The shuttle punched through the atmosphere and descended toward the edge of the fire zone. Warning alarms screamed about external temperatures. The hull groaned under thermal stress. Megan did not care. She landed as close as she dared, then suited up in emergency gear and ran out into the heat. She found him 200 meters from the shuttle. He was lying face down on the scorched ground, his suit melted and torn, his body motionless. She grabbed him under the arms and dragged him back toward the shuttle. He weighed almost nothing. He had always been a lean man, but the heat had stolen something from him. He felt hollow. She got him inside. She sealed the hatch. She ripped off his helmet and started emergency resuscitation. No pulse. She pressed her hands against his chest and began compressions. 1, 2, 3, breathe. 1, 2, 3, breathe. Come on, Danny. Come on. You did not walk through fire just to die in a shuttle. Come on. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. His vital monitor showed a flat line. No heartbeat. No brain activity. He had been dead for 3 minutes now. 4 minutes was the threshold for brain damage. 5 minutes, and there would be nothing left to save. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. The shuttle shook as the charges detonated far behind them. Even from this distance, Megan could feel the shockwave. The shield generator was destroyed. The mission was successful. None of it mattered if Danny did not wake up. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. She was crying now, tears falling onto his burned face. She did not stop the compressions. She could not stop. She would not stop. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. And then, impossibly, his eyes opened. He looked up at her with eyes that had seen hell and walked through it. His cracked lips moved. He whispered something she could barely hear. Did we win? Megan laughed and sobbed at the same time. She collapsed against him, holding him as gently as she could, afraid he might break. Yeah, she managed. Yeah, Danny, we won. Above them, the Coalition fleet moved into position. The Vorith command ship's shields flickered and died. 1,000 weapons fired as one. The war was about to change forever. The explosion was visible from orbit. The Vorith command ship, pride of the Dominion fleet, broke apart in a cascade of fire and debris. Secondary explosions rippled through its hull as weapons systems detonated and fuel cells ruptured. Within minutes, the ship that had terrorized a dozen worlds was nothing but scattered wreckage drifting through space. The Coalition fleet pressed their advantage. Without their command ship, the Vorith forces fell into disarray. Ships that had seemed invincible now fled in panic as coordinated strikes overwhelmed their defenses. By the time the battle ended, the Dominion had lost 40% of their forces in this sector. It was the greatest victory the Coalition had achieved in 18 months of war. And it had been made possible by one man walking through fire. Danny Cole woke in a medical bay 6 days later. The room was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines monitoring his vital signs. White light filtered through panels in the ceiling, gentle and warm. For a long moment, he simply lay there, trying to remember where he was and how he had gotten there. Then the memories came flooding back. The fire, the pain, the endless walk through a burning hell. He looked down at his hands and saw they were wrapped in thick, regenerative bandages. He could feel similar wrappings on his chest, his legs, his face. He was more bandaged than man, but he was alive. The door opened and Megan Torres walked in. She stopped when she saw his eyes were open. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she crossed the room in 3 quick steps and sat down on the edge of his bed. "You stupid, stubborn man," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. "Hello to you too," Danny croaked. His throat felt like sandpaper. Megan laughed, though tears were running down her face. "Your heart stopped for 4.5 minutes. The doctors said you should have permanent brain damage. They said you would never walk again. They said a lot of things. What do you say?" She reached out and carefully took his bandaged hand in hers. "I say you are too stubborn to listen to doctors." The door opened again. Admiral Kethoran entered, followed by General Voss, Corporal Zeth, and a dozen other officers representing every species in the coalition. They filled the small room until there was barely space to move. Danny tried to sit up, but his body refused to cooperate. Megan helped him raise the bed so he could at least face his visitors. Admiral Kethoran stepped forward. The Silvani commander looked different than Danny remembered. The despair that had weighed him down was gone. In its place was something that might have been hope. "Sergeant Cole," the admiral began formally. "On behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I wish to inform you of recent developments. Since the destruction of the Vorith command ship, the Dominion has withdrawn from 3 systems. Intelligence reports indicate they are pulling back their forces across the entire sector. This is the first strategic retreat in Vorith history." Danny blinked. "They are retreating? They are afraid," General Voss rumbled. The Moktal general who had once laughed at Danny's offer was not laughing now. Word has spread through their ranks about what happened on Thesson IV. A single being walked through temperatures that should have killed any living creature. A single being accomplished what their entire army could not prevent. "They are calling you the Ghost," Zeth added. His golden eyes gleamed with pride. "Their soldiers whisper that the Coalition has found a spirit that cannot be killed. A being that walks through death itself. A being." Admiral Kethoran reached into his robes and produced a small medallion. It was made of silvery metal, etched with symbols from a dozen different languages. In the center was a flame, and walking through that flame was a small figure. "This is the highest honor the Coalition can bestow," Kethoran said. "It has not been awarded in 300 years. It is given to those who embody courage beyond reason, sacrifice beyond duty, spirit beyond flesh." He held up the medallion. "I present you with the title of Keth Vorin, Ghost of War." Danny stared at the medal. He did not know what to say. He had not done this for medals or titles or recognition. He had done it because someone had to. "I am not a ghost," he said quietly. "I am just a man." Kethoran smiled. It was the first time Danny had seen the Admiral smile since the war began. "That is precisely the point, Sergeant. You are not a ghost. You are something far more frightening to our enemies. You are a human." The Admiral pinned the medal to Danny's blanket, since his chest was too wrapped in bandages to wear it properly. One by one, the other officers approached to offer their respects. Moktal warriors who had dismissed humans as weak now bowed their heads. Silvani officers whose people considered themselves the wisest species in the galaxy acknowledged that they had something to learn. Drenari engineers who dealt only in logic and mathematics admitted that some things could not be calculated. When the room finally emptied, only Megan and Zeth remained. Danny was exhausted, but he fought to stay awake. There was something he needed to know. "How long until I can walk again?" he asked. Megan frowned. "The doctors say 6 months of rehabilitation at minimum. Your legs suffered severe nerve damage. Your hands will need multiple reconstructive surgeries. You are going to be recovering for a very long time." Danny nodded slowly. He looked out the window at the stars beyond. The war was not over. The Vorith were retreating. But they would regroup. They would return. There would be more battles, more impossible situations, more moments when someone needed to do what could not be done. "Then I should get started," he said. Zeth laughed. A deep rumbling sound that shook his scales. "Rest first. Human. The war will still be there when you are healed." "He is right," Megan agreed. "You have done enough, Danny. More than enough. Let someone else be the hero for a while." Danny smiled slightly. It hurt to smile, but he did it anyway. "I am not trying to be a hero. I just want to make sure we finish what we started." Weeks passed. Then, months. Danny endured surgery after surgery, therapy session after therapy session. The doctors marveled at his progress. He healed faster than their models predicted. He regained function that they had said was impossible. He walked when they said he would never stand. Through it all, Megan was beside him. She had been reassigned to Nexus Prime as Danny's official liaison, which really meant she had bullied the command staff until they gave her an excuse to stay close. Zeth visited whenever he could between deployments, bringing news of battles won and ground reclaimed. The tide of the war had turned. The Vorith were still dangerous, but they had lost something crucial. They had lost their belief that they could not be stopped. And across the galaxy, the story spread of the human who had walked through fire, the ghost of war, who proved that courage and will could overcome any obstacle. On the day Danny finally walked unassisted for the first time, he made his way to the observation deck. Megan walked beside him, ready to catch him if he fell. But he did not fall. He stood at the viewport and looked out at the stars. "How do you feel?" Megan asked. Danny thought about the question. He thought about Nebraska and summer heat and a family he would never stop missing. He thought about the fire and the pain and the moment his heart had stopped. He thought about the title they had given him and what it meant to those who watched. "I feel human," he said. Megan smiled and took his hand. "Is that good? Is that good?" Danny watched a convoy of coalition ships pass the station, heading out to push back the Dominion forces another few light years. Somewhere among those ships were beings who had seen his walk through fire and found courage they did not know they had. Somewhere out there, enemies told stories of the ghost that could not be killed. But he was not a ghost. He was just a man from Nebraska who refused to quit. "Yeah," he said finally. "That is good." They stood together in the starlight. Two humans among a galaxy of wonders, watching the war turn toward hope. The future was uncertain. More battles waited. More sacrifices would be required. But for this moment, Danny Cole was content. He had walked through fire and lived. He had proven something about his species that the galaxy would never forget. Humans were small. Humans were fragile. Humans burned and bled and broke like any other creature. But humans did not stop. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything.